Okay, the guys, let's look at what's going on real quickly. We are going to go over more bones today and do some Sherlock bones and trying to figure out what bones belong to human and if it's female or male. Okay, we are going to actually first watch a little video on a skeleton that was found in a high school back east, and a real skeleton and how they figured out what it was. And then we're going to do some little hands-on stuff. You're going to do some research with skeleton keys here, so you'll want to have this up so you can to get into it. If you have already done it, great. Okay, so this is what's happening the last of the term. Please listen. Okay, first up, tomorrow, ACT. After that, Thursday, we are finishing the body cavities and the organs. And then Monday, we are going to start with your crime scene. You have to have one other person in your group. So there's 2 max in a group. And you're going to start making your crime scene. You're going to do your blood spatter. You got to decide on what kind of blood spatter you're going to have for your crime scene. We're going to do that on Monday. Anything out of the crime forensic lockers that you need comes out Monday. I will not be here on Wednesday. I'll be back down at Slick. So that's the day that you can finish up writing up everything that you need for your write-up. Make sure that you're looking at the rubrics because they are different this time, and I'll be grading them differently. On Friday the 13th, we're going to set up our crime scenes out in the commons. You'll each get a big square that you get to set up your crime scenes. Friday the 13th, I thought it was apropos. And then you're going to process them, but you've got to be able to set them up in 15 minutes, and it's got to include everything we've learned so far. Okay, so it's got to have something of everything we've learned. And then on the 17th, you'll come back after processing, and you're going to do your lab analysis, whatever you need to do in lab. You're going to set up your PowerPoint. You're going to do whatever you need to do to finish that up. And then on Thursday the 19th, that's when you're going to come professionally dressed, like you're going to present to court, and we're the judge and jury. And we're going to decide if you got enough to convict this person or not. Okay? Now, along with this, along the way, you're going to have 2 other tests that are hands-on tests. And I'll talk about those as we get going a little bit more here in a minute. But Friday the 20th is the end of 3rd term, and we're on to 4th term. We're almost done. Okay, so here we go.
Wait, this towel?
Yes.
Is the bones activity?
We're going to get to that in just a minute.
Is that last time?
Those were the things that we put on last time, but we're going to get to another little quiz here in just a second.
Okay, we didn't finish that. Do we have time to do it today?
You might have a little bit, but you've got some other bone activities going on today. Okay, so day 3, we're learning secrets from the bones. First thing we're going to listen to is a little video here, hopefully on, here we go.
There's an old skeleton hanging in the art room of this high school in Erie, Pennsylvania. It isn't plastic. It's made of real bones that belonged to a real person, but no one knows who that person was. Not the art teacher, Mrs. Leisure.
I have no idea where he came from. It could have been here for 100 years.
Not the principal, Mr. Vieira.
The lore is it came from the Ganges. We consistently hear that it's male based on the bone structure.
And not my friend Alyssa Nadworny. She went to school here, and now she works with me at NPR.
When I found out my school had a human skeleton, I wanted to find out everything I could about it.
So here at Skunk Bear, we decided to see what science could tell us about these bones.
On TV, they always start with one thing.
Her DNA.
DNA sample?
DNA.
So we took the skeleton to a DNA expert at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History, Dr. Logan Kistler, and asked, can you get DNA from an old skeleton?
It's probably going to take 4 to 6 weeks of lab work and analysis. It might cost up to about $5,000.
Okay, so no DNA analysis. We needed to find someone who could tell us something by just looking at the bones. So we went back to Erie, to Mercyhurst University, where we met Dennis Dirkman. He reads bones for a living, working with law enforcement to identify remains associated with crimes.
There's a lot of information to be told from the skeleton.
He called in some colleagues to measure every inch of our skeleton. First up, is this skeleton a man, like everyone thinks?
We usually start with the pelvis.
Females have broader pelvises to make childbirth easier, but this pelvis is kind of hard to interpret. It's somewhere in the middle. But there are more clues in other parts of the body.
A very clear marker is the mastoid process.
That's the bony bump where the jaw muscles attach to the skull. Men have bigger jaw muscles, so they have bigger bumps than women, and this skeleton has a small bump. And there are other clues too. The shape of the eye sockets, the brow ridges, the curve at the back of the skull.
All the features here indicate that this is female.
When we walked in here, we thought for sure this is a male.
Okay, next, was she young or old? To get an age, Dirkmatt's team looked at places where the skeleton's bones had fused. See, we're born with about 300 separate bones, but around the time we hit 40, we only have 206. That's because at specific times in our lives, certain bones fuse together. 2 plates at the front of the skull fuse in our first year. Our upper arm bone fuses in our teens. And then there's the clavicle.
There's a little line there that tells us that it's in the process of fusing. This is probably somebody 20 to 30, probably mid-20s.
Wow, I wasn't expecting it to be that young.
Next, her height. Dirkmatt's team took a few bone measurements and used them to calculate how tall she was.
This one came out just a little above 5 feet.
How tall are you?
5'1" or 2.
I'm 5'3".
This is sort of like almost you.
I know, it's really freaking me out.
The other aspect of the big 4 in our biological profile is the ancestry.
Dirkmatt's team compared her head measurements to a digitized database of skulls from around the world. And another surprise, the computer program says this skull looks most like a Japanese female. But there's a lot of uncertainty here, and the most Dirkmatt will say is,
It's probably Asian.
So we're starting to build a life story. This is a young woman who has Asian ancestry. So the next question is, where is she from? Did she grow up near Erie, where we found her? Or could she have lived in Japan? Or near the Ganges, like the principal herd? Well, I did some research, and it turns out that a lot of skeletons in medical schools, art schools, and high schools actually came from India. There was a shady but legal trade in human remains between India and the West that started in the 1800s.
so can we tell if this skeleton got here as part of that bone trade? These bones probably hold more clues. They're just hidden deep down in their very atoms. So we sent off a very tiny piece of bone to a geochemistry lab to see what they could tell us.
Hello, this is Doug Kennett calling from Penn State.
Hello!
Hey, Doug!
Kennett is the guy who got our sample, dunked it in acid, burned it into a gas, and sorted its molecules in this giant machine.
Believe it or not, that gave us a clue about where she came from by telling us what she ate.
This is sort of an old adage that you are what you eat.
If you live where they eat a lot of stuff made from corn, like in Pennsylvania, your bones have one chemical signature. No corn, but a certain mix of land plants and animals, like you find in continental Asia, a different signature. And if you eat a lot of seafood, like you probably would in Japan, different again. So, what did the bones tell us? This woman's diet looked like this.
Probably not an island or a coastal environment. So certainly consistent with someone living in India, Pakistan, sort of Central Eurasia.
So she could have come from the Ganges region, and she could have been transported to the US via this bone trade, but only if the dates line up. Did she die when this bone trade was happening? Kennett's first step was to look for a chemical timestamp. Back in the 1950s, nuclear testing flooded the world with huge amounts of radioactive carbon.
We call it a bomb spike in the atmosphere.
And anyone who lived through it or was born after it has lots of that radiocarbon in their bones. But in our sample, Kennett didn't find this marker.
So we can say definitively that this person did not live after 1955.
But he was able to read more subtle markers to figure out when she did live.
The most likely interval that this individual lived was between 1875 and 1920.
So it kind of fits right in that timeline that these skeletons would be coming to the US. And it's so weird to think that, like, at the beginning of this process, it was basically a pile of bones on a string. And then the more you learn about it, it becomes this real person.
All this new information just underlines a bunch of really tricky questions. Should skeletons like these be used in classrooms at all? And if not, how should we lay them to rest? No lab test can tell us what any of these people believed in or what they would have wanted.
Okay, so, whoops, we're going to see about how much you learned from last time. So there's a little quiz at the bottom of that, about mid-page, you'll see a grid. I'm going to read it to you, and then I want you to write what we would commonly call it. So I'm going to use the names that I want you to learn, but I want you to give me the common name for it, okay? I should have known it was going to be one of those days when I had stepped out of bed and stubbed my phalange on the nightstand. That's number one. While hopping up and down on one metatarsal, that's number two, and grasping the other, I slipped and fell onto my right shoulder, breaking my clavicle, number three. So write down what the normal name would be, what you know it as. Nope, what you know it as. As I crawled on my metacarpals, number four, and my patellas to my bed. Does anybody need any of those repeated? You got the common names down for those? Okay, going to the last five. I felt my cranium begin to ache. So cranium's number six. I found my phone and let my, number seven, phalanges do the walking as I called my friend to come out to help me. My friend answered the phone with a loud scream. My 8, mandible, dropped. I asked what happened, and he replied that he had been startled by my ringing phone and fell out of bed and landed on his 9, coccyx. Following that, while racing to the phone, he hit his, number 10, tibia on a stool. I should have known it was going to be one of those days. Anybody need any of them repeated? Okay, so now you get to try and see how well you did. Everybody got them answered? Okay, here we go. I should have known that it was going to be one of those days when I stepped out of bed and stubbed my toes on the nightstand. While hopping up and down on one foot and grasping the other, I slipped and fell onto my right shoulder, breaking my collarbone. As I crawled on my hands and knees to bed, I felt my head or skull begin to ache. I found my phone and let my fingers do the walking as I called my friend out to help me. My friends answered the phone with a loud scream. My lower jaw dropped. I asked what had happened, and he replied that he had been startled by the ringing phone and fell out of bed and fell on his tailbone. Following that, while racing to the phone, he hit his shin on a stool. I should have known it was going to be one of those days. Okay, how'd we do? Any 10 out of 10s? Woo-hoo.
Yes, technically.
Technically.
But like.
Okay. All right. So I have put a link on your Canvas so that you can get to skeleton keys. So I'm going to let you do that in a minute. I'm just going to show you that that's where you're going. That's the picture you're looking at when you hit that link. What I'd like to do first off before we go any farther is I want to go over anatomical directions again really quickly. I'm going to fast forward through this video. I'm not going to watch all of it, but it does have a really nice
anatomical directional terms. Reference to the anatomical position. The anatomical position is when a person stands erect, face pointing forward, arms at the sides, related to anatomy. We're going to start with superior and inferior. Superior means toward the, so we would say toward the feet, but it can also mean lower or below. So we would say that the heart is located superior to the small intestine, or we could say the small intestine is located inferior to the heart. Next is anterior and posterior, or in back of. So we would say the sternum is anterior to the heart, and the heart is posterior to the sternum. Sometimes the terms ventral and dorsal are used in place of anterior and posterior, where ventral means anterior and dorsal means posterior. Anterior and posterior can also be used to describe how you're looking at the body. While the body will always be referenced from the anatomical position, it can be viewed from an anterior view, meaning looking at the body from the front, and it can also be viewed from the posterior view, meaning looking at it in directional terms. Medial means toward the midline of the body, and lateral means toward the side of the body, or away from the midline of the body. Say that the heart lies medial to the lungs, or you could say that the lungs lie lateral to the heart. Lateral can also be used to describe how you're looking at the body. While the body will always be referenced from the anatomical position, it can be viewed from the lateral view, meaning looking at the body from the side, usually used when describing parts of the appendicular body. Remember that the axial body consists of the head, neck, and trunk, and the appendicular body consists of the limbs or appendages that are added to the axial body, or further from the trunk of the body. So we would say the thigh is proximal to the foot, or you could say the foot is distal to the thigh. Superficial and deep are another set of directional terms. Body. So we would say the sternum is superficial to the lungs, or the lungs are deep to the sternum. Remember, this is the case when we're looking at the body from the front or anterior view, when it's in the anatomical position. And that be the anatomical.
Okay, so we also want to look at some different planes. We need to be able to remember some of the planes. So remember, a transverse plane is a horizontal plane where we get the superior, inferior. A frontal or coronal plane, and we can go medial or lateral. A sagittal plane, it's right through the body, the midline, anterior, posterior. And a lot of these will be the same going through. I gave you lots of different diagrams so that you could practice some of these on your own. So I'm going to go a little bit fast through these. Yes?
Something I'm always kind of struggling with are the planes.
Uh-huh.
I always thought that bilateral was two sides, but it's really the two splits, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, we're not going to be holding as much on that one. There's specific planes that we do need to know, the transverse, the coronal, the sagittal, we do need to know. Let me go forward here. We've got the frontal plane, which is also the dorsal or ventral. Sagittal, we've got here in the center, and that's also, sagittal can be off to the side. Sagittal basically just means it's cut vertically, okay? So the median plane is right in the middle, but the sagittal we can cut vertically anywhere. So if we go median of the plane of the foot, we would go in the middle of the foot. So when it says median, it's in the middle of, okay, but it's vertically. Transverse planes are anywhere that we want to cut horizontal. Okay. So as I look at a bigger version here, we can see a little bit more going on. We've got all of the different versions of things that we've just been talking about: anterior, posterior, lateral, medial, proximal, distal, inferior, superior. Another way to look at it with our coronal plane, our transverse plane, our sagittal plane, so we can get a lot of different verbiage and things going on here when we're talking about they were stabbed in the arm proximal to the shoulder or distal to the elbow, so far away from the elbow. We can be very descriptive on where they've been stabbed or where they've been shot or where damage has occurred if we know the terms. Okay. Remember, simple ones right here: anterior, posterior. I know I'm going fast, but I want these were stuff we've already gone over. So
are we supposed to leave these on our own pad, guys?
So I want you to, if you want to grab some of them that you don't remember, that's great, but these are ones that you need to know. And there's several that are the same pictures. They're just different ways you can do them. Okay, so remember, supine, up, pronation, down, face down. Okay, anterior, posterior. And then we've got another look here where we've got lateral, medial, proximal, distal, inferior, superior, anterior, posterior. Anterior is ventral, posterior is dorsal. So a lot of different ways that you can look at it. So supination, I'm trying to make somebody give me stuff. Pronation, worshiping. Okay. There's also this one where it takes one at a time rather than trying to put it all on the same. So depending on which one hits you best, that's great. I also have a little learning check here for you with a guy, and I've put some numbers here. You might see that again. Okay, so make sure that you know what's what. And then the last one, of course, superficial versus deep. We went through that already. Directional terms. We need to be able to talk about directional terms as far as what's going on with the body that's been found. So now we're going to do some bone activities. The first one is a precursor to your test. So you will need to be able to do this in 5 minutes. Put this skeleton together and put all the labels on it. Okay? I am checking these out to you. One person, everybody gets one. And then you need to turn it back into me. So I'm going to put a timer up. Go ahead and dump everything out. I'm going to put a timer up, and let's see if we can do it in 5 minutes. So if you're not here, you need to make sure you are talking to me so that you can get one of these.
But we have to label them in 5 minutes too.
Yep. So here we go.
I haven't.
Ready? Everybody got dumped out? Set.
In the best
Go. And I give you a few seconds before I push play. See if you can put them together.
Is this supposed to like actually look like it?
Yep.
Okay, but what's this? Wait, what is it? Oh, that does not look like that.
No. I did the best with what I had. That's the best one I could find. Some of them were really bad.
Where's the rest of the vertebrae? I think mine's missing some.
This is the first. The vertebrae is hidden behind the.
Wait, what is this? Hey, bro, is this supposed to be cool?
You can help each other, talk to each other if you need to, or if you need to go hints, I'll give you hints right now. But this will sort of let you see where you're at and what you need to do to practice. That's supposed to be. It's not triangle like it's supposed to be, but that's the best version I can find on mine.
Are there like how many?
Looks like a tie is a tie, right?
There's 3. Vertebrae. It doesn't fit on my desk.
Turn it sideways. Yeah, I would do it sideways. I would do it a long way around.
I have one.
Unless you're gonna put them cross-legged.
Sternum is really long. Am I doing it right, Colin? We still have to label them.
Leads come down here.
Oh, is that the stuff? That's what.
And it's covering the.
Why do you have like this? I'm like,
Yeah, that way.
put the feet on you. I'm going to the leg bone. Oh, just like that. So it's not uterus? Oh, these are the. So is this the part that connects? Yeah, that's the part. I don't have enough space for myself. So those are your clavicles. Clavicles. I think I'm
You guys are doing much better than first period.
Wait, is that your bone or mine? Oh, jeez. That is fine. Wait, did you? Whoa, wait. Alright, is this?
Is that right?
Wait, where is the second?
Where?
Where? Right here. Where?
This is a leg. You have 2 legs.
These are your legs?
That's a leg.
JC.
This is the hip. All joint.
Hey, these are arms, right?
Yes.
That's sweet.
It's fine.
Here.
I think I have 2 of the same foot. I don't remember.
can't fit all of my skeleton onto that.
That's why you sort of need to go sideways. So if you have to make their legs go out sideways.
Okay.
Okay, how did you know where it was?
All right.
You have to label it.
Okay, will you tell me?
Forgot about that.
Do you want to tell me if this is right? Oh, that's an arm. Oh, that's an arm.
I will shatter you.
Okay, so you're just halfway through right now. So if you start labeling, you're good.
Great.
What is this called?
You lost your little guy. Oh, there we go.
Like this.
Okay, that makes more sense. Do you need kneecaps?
Is it the big one? Oh, big one on the knee.
The big one goes on the other right? Yeah, I know that. Radius is the thumb side. This thumb? Yeah. Okay. What's the highway? It's in your neck. Okay. And finally, what is the xiphoid process? Your side of your sleeve. Oh, I didn't even see that. Is that what that is? Wait. Right there. So I have ADHD. I don't know if this is right.
Which one's
not winning. Yeah, I don't really know. I just wanted to that one.
Yep, because Amphibia told a fib and it's love.
And this one's right.
That's how I remember it.
If this were a competition, I can't, I want some kind of.
Must have touched it. You guys got extra time. You hadn't stopped it when you touched it.
It's like the ulna radius, or like. What the heck are these?
What or what? C.
These. Unless I got horses and carpet.
So
He's go in front of these right there. He's go like this.
there's 6.
Oh, yeah. Why are the legs like that? Wait, whoa, I'm not done
Okay.
yet.
So I had stopped that, so I don't know how close you guys were really to
I'm
getting
not.
done. But some
I'm
of
still
you are
struggling.
done. Awesome. Help somebody that's about you that isn't done.
I don't know the arms are like. The hyoid is like
Almond radius.
Okay, I have these two left. Is this one tibia?
I don't know what this
So there
is.
should be a little
Oh, wait.
I think it's this thing. Hey, do you guys know which one's the tibia?
The tibia
They're
is
supposed to
xiphoid.
Oh, so which one's the large side?
Xiphoid.
They all said different things.
So do I not
And
know
I'm
this?
done. The tibia is the bigger one because the fibula is what? Okay, then the ulna and the radius is I thought if you tell a lie, your nose gets bigger. So the radius is on your thumb. Yeah, it's the big ulna. Okay. I'm just relaxing, going at my own pace. Okay.
Okay, how we doing?
Great. I think I see
Okay, so you want to practice. You want to time yourself.
Wait,
Under 5 minutes is an A. 6 minutes a B. 7 minutes a C. Possibly extra credit if you get if you're the fastest one.
Did I
Okay.
do it?
Yes, these are yours checked out to you.
Wait, are you supposed to check these? Are you checking these today?
I'm not checking them
So
today.
next time to finish, can I just finish? 'Cause I
Yeah,
really
you
want
can
to
finish.
So
You can
I
finish. While you're finishing, while you're picking up and putting stuff away, these are checked out to you, okay? I am checking them out to you. I need a set back from you at the end of this. So whenever you feel like you are ready to do the test on this, you let me know and I'll time you. See how good you are, okay? And if you don't get what grade you would like, you can redo it up until the last day of class, okay? All right, there's one other test that we're going to be doing with this, and I will show you that next time, okay? Because it has to do with the body cavities. I'm actually going to close that off now, and I'm going to have you look over here for a minute. We are going to, we have 3 grade sites over here, okay? This is grade site 2, grade site 3, and grade site 1. Okay, you are going to have little tools, which I don't know where I put them. They're here. You're going to have a little bag of tools. In the little bag of tools, you're going to have a caliper. Okay, you're going to have a caliper. You need to be careful and either read on the outside if you're using it to measure the outside, or on the inside if you're measuring something squished. If you don't know how to read a caliper, let me know and I will come and help. You need to take measurements on each of these 3 skeletons. you need to determine, are they female? Are they male? Do their sutures look like they have fused? How old do you think they are? Okay, if you get those 3 done and you'd like some extra credit, you can do the class skeleton and see what you think the class skeleton is.
He's 25 years old.
Now, let's see. Up here, I also have a full disarticulated skeleton that you, if you get done with all the others, you can try and put together. What I wanted to do is I wanted to show you what the xiphoid process is. Or not the xiphoid, the hyoid. So this is what the hyoid looks like, and it is what your tongue attaches to. And it's actually found right here, and it's just connected with cartilage.
I don't like that.
Isn't that like
Okay?
I just
So not really. Okay? And I already told you guys about my surgery with and showed you the thing, but you're more than welcome to come over here and look at what each of the spine pieces look like. The smallest one is one that is flat. So you're looking at this flat one. Well, where is it? You find it. Gotta find the endodontic first. The flat one.
I'm missing a
Go backwards. There you go. Yeah, I was right. This flat one is C1. The one that has little fingers sticking up, that's the endodontoid. That's what I broke. That's C2. So remember, C1 lets you rock back and forth, and C2 lets you go side to side. I broke that, so they fused these 2 together, so I can only go that far and that far.
Wait, you broke your C2?
I broke my C2, my endodontoid. So they fused C1 and C2 together, and they put 2.5-inch screws up into my skull right here to hold them, and then they put a bone graft on the back side.
Were you almost paralyzed?
Not, well, the surgeon, when I went down right before Easter break, I said, can I wait until after school gets out, because I was teaching AP at the time, and they were almost to the AP test, and, really stressful time. He says, well, I've got 2 people, wait, one's dead, the other one's a quad. Okay, sign me up.
One was a vegetable.
One was a quadriplegic.
I was asking.
Yeah, a quadriplegic. So I'm going to have this bones out here, and if you get done with the other 3, then you can come put the whole skeleton together. Now, I want you to write these up in your lab notebook. If you didn't bring your lab notebook, you're going to have a paper that you keep track of everything. All the measurements and which ones made you lead to think it's a female, male, how old. Okay? All right. So come get, you can be in a group of 2. Come get your measurement things up here, and then as you get your measurements, just move around and spread out to different people. Bones. Different bones. Oh, there's also 2 big calipers, so when you do the legs and stuff for the length, there are 2 big calipers, and you just do the length like this. And you read in here. Okay? And those will be bouncing around because I only have 2.
This right here.
I also do have a ruler up here that you can use to measure. Sherlock Holmes.
My mom broke her C. I don't know. I don't look up all of this thing. Oh wait. It was in the middle of the night. My job's anyway, and then she went back to bed. And then she was at Davis for like 7 hours.
Yeah. Okay, let's get these guys ready first.
Hey, the skeleton needs braces.
That one has an override. This one has an underride.
Oh, that's it. So we can take this one with.
Okay, so as you go to measure, so I'm looking at this side. So I look at how it snatches up the first time, so 39 points, and that time that snatch after that. If I was trying trying to find out how wide this hole was. So the outside's up here, it says outside, it says inside.
Like this?
That's the inside. Sorry, you can hold it yourself. See how it says inside or outside? So now you're gonna take this here and 0 to it's like 60 point, and when I find out which one of these are, that's lined up with
Hey, where are these called sectors?
So it's the humerus, the how long it is, the skull, the looking at the shape of it, is it a Mickey Mouse or is it more of a Pac-Man?
Okay, so wait. Is that
A, B, and C, 1, 2, 3, and then the class one if you have time.
No.
What if your jaw fell off? Ouch! That's what happens to the people that did the radiation.
Hey, did you see this? Oh, wait, you did.
It just goes.
You heard
This
it?
is just for you and
Still is turning. It's a humor. Second place. So we're gonna find.
so you can measure them, see how long they are.
So.
Are you even doing anything? No, I'm trying to, I had to put that second one. Yeah, yeah. Like, the current policies of America.
I think it should have. Everyone complains about the coronavirus, even though yeah, and it's brought down CO2.
So on this one right here, so when you go to measure,
China,
if you're trying to measure a hole inside, you're
gonna be a
going
full
to
outside
this
for
and
there.
do it.
Jonathan!
That was so loud.
That was so loud. Right here.
I'm trying to find outside, I'm just trying to find out here. So this one I used inside, this one should have been the outside, so I should have used this one. So 30%.
Wow.
And then this
You
one.
remember again?
38. So measure not always timing, you don't always get it.
Okay, so what do we have?
Still in, still in.
And we're only doing what? There's no bones.
So you can have this whole right here, it's not as you can
I
see.
guess we're supposed to do that. I just like it was though.
And then you read.
Yeah, look, that's what they're doing, and I'm smart. I just sure what we're supposed to do. Okay. They don't sure what let's just do 35 I don't exactly understand.
So you're gonna measure the length, and then you're gonna measure the head.
Okay.
Okay?
That's what on the tibia.
Is that a toddler skull?
Yeah, but look at the sutures.
Mr. Howell, this is the second.
So the sutures here are fused. It's not falling apart, right? And these are not.
But tibia was 35.
Okay, they're not as, look at over here,
So
where
like
the skin,
inches?
you can't barely even see the sutures.
Well, I think we've guessed, right?
It's a man.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so
And
it's.
then you want to there's no way babies when their arms not 30 for the nose, there's the nose and the eye sockets.
So where am I looking to?
This looks like a man.
Am I looking at?
Well, I mean, everything else is female.
How?
Where's another skull? I need to. Oh, right here.
Yeah. That's not a baby.
So is this like where you measure 0?
So did you do, were you measuring inside or outside?
You have another and the head, this is, that
So
is.
on this one, you look inside, you get the 0.
That looks too
Above
small.
50, so this is the 50, and then you, on each one of these lines, and then okay, almost like
32 by 40.
So you
Well, is she turning 19 or 20?
So title or, so if you measure the outside, if they're trying to
Is
find
this
the
like
outside,
skeleton
they're trying to
number
find this distance right here. And it's like it's the outside, it's gonna be 100.
Then that's gonna be a hard challenge. Today?
Yeah.
That's so confusing.
This is a female.
I think that
Okay, you gotta write down
Are
the
all
measurements and then tell me what measurements you do that.
Are all men female? Well, I put male. No?
Make sure you're looking at the bun at the back of the head, the mastoid process. Remember on a guy, it's bigger on the mastoid process, and the female's little. It's this process right here.
This is larger, but the rest of it says. I do what I want, it's not.
You gotta decide.
Maybe looking at. Is that? I'm not sure exactly. I don't know, because like the pride of each looking at the.
Right, but if it was, so these are harder to be able to tell because
That's what I just did.
No, it doesn't.
Just one dude?
So these are all those details. You're gonna look and you'll see.
Should I make that wallet chain out of teeth?
Okay, babe.
Cause this one, see, just see this. And that one does. Oh, but this came up.
So when they're totally babies.
So how, if that's what it looked like.
This is so.
This is like, look at the right, I would say.
That's definitely a guy. That's definitely. No. Oh, yeah, we're okay. Cause this one, it's female everywhere else except like back here and back.
It's like bun.
And this man needs some braces. What is that feminine? And the pelvis, that could fit. This is a Neanderthal.
Yeah, that's a very big.
So I would probably say
He's a
this
full
person just because the way you just don't see everything would probably be.
You just had the opportunity to just look with your eyes. You see sometimes mommy says something when you take this. You look with your eyes, look at your eyes.
This one.
It's not, yeah, that is, yeah. I just kind of took from the video. Square eyes.
What you got there?
Pretty skull.
So this one actually is, it's almost like a
It just
because it's flatter up top. So this is not
It's
Asian will be
Be like,
European.
European are, they've got the tiny things here, so it's flat at the top and then they've got this dip here. This
what's your explanation?
divot, like a aviator glasses. So straight and then deep around here. And you can also tell it's a guy.
Wait, are we supposed to figure out like, what other?
Yeah, about. See, you're gonna figure out. So yours, you can't see many of the suture lines, that means it's gonna be.
This is a surprisingly big.
Like, oh, what other information? So this is how you figure out if it's male and female. Measure the back of the head. So this part is big for the jaw.
Like measurements of all of it?
Using
This and this.
But like,
Okay, make sure you're moving around. You got 30 minutes left.
yeah, his arms are like the size.
just put like.
So the only things that are not.
His arms are like the size of my arm, so I don't know how big this is. This would just go like right here.
Probably.
Yes.
And
It
then
has a mustache, has like a giant legs and arms with a
So
tiny
this
head.
would be male, right? Am I right?
Wow. You're terrible.
So I guess I have to look at that.
It's
So you
weird.
wanna do lengths, so you guys.
I don't know if this is a chop because like, it'll be
Okay,
a
so
very
I'm
big
thinking
chop.
so far I'm thinking male, but I actually know I've got to look at the color. Thank you.
Start measuring, guys,
Thank
get everything
you.
measured.
And then these would be wider, it's.
So when you look down in the pelvis, if it looks like a Mickey Mouse ears, rather than really scrunched ears, then it's probably a female.
So then this would be male.
I guess I'm not handling it anymore.
This
This is
one
my
could
trophy
be
of all the
either
children.
or. There's one over there that's so long, you can see. This one still has some
Yeah, I
pretty
see.
Mickey Mouse looking
I want
ears.
Oh, this part. Oh.
See what I'm saying?
I think this is a female.
Wait, which one's for
Like
sure
an
male?
adolescent female. I think this is an adolescent female.
Okay, I think this is like separate too.
The back of her head is super minor.
Yeah, so this one's not. So this what's your color? This is female.
Would you agree though? She's an adolescent female because of this.
Oh.
Okay, quickly try and get all of the things measured, and then you gotta decide, female, male,
This is probably
how old do you think about that?
How old do you have to be for this?
Hold on, yeah, I figured it out.
It'd be old, yeah, because the bottom occipital, one's the back,
Like, my
it
hips
gets
are way
fused,
big.
then it's 80.
they're,
Okay,
it's
so-
old.
Well,
I
because
they're actual size.
I think they should be those.
Are these the actual size?
Yeah, like that's the
About, you're saying about.
Like, that's kind of big. That's not the femur. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're on my desk.
Oh, it's supposed to be back.
This I think is supposed to be the radius.
Keep alive.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm being lazy today.
Yes, you are. That's it, right? You managed to be a.
I don't want to say that.
So this is the actual size, that was so much
This is like
smaller.
a free I had to move my brother out of this apartment.
So that would be your.
This goes here. Okay, I found it, guys.
Okay, so
It
this
is a
is
child. Yeah, I found it.
But
I
you
told
gotta have all the measurements down to prove it. You can't just say female, you gotta prove
I
what.
saw this. This is a dead child we discovered. And then we found like
It would
4
be
parts
bigger,
of it.
but that's not really big. That's,
Yeah.
that's
That is satisfying.
So that's really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a bit too much.
And it's more curved than the guy.
Yeah, yeah.
When you go over there, you'll see the fun.
I don't think we go for the size.
Yes, I think we're discovering more.
Yeah. But there's
But
so
like, why
much-
is the pelvis so
Oh,
small? I think it has to be a child, because like my pelvis, either that or I'm like secretly though, because look, it's, but even then, this is supposed to be.
They're like very like.
Like,
Where
right
you
here.
know,
And that
mandibles,
says 30 to
you
40.
look at the bun. What?
How much else really good for it, and that's why it's so cool. Yeah, this is very steep compared to that one we squeezed before you take it.
So for.
Okay, she's gotta be between
female,
40
we
and
have
50 years old due to this.
So wherever yeah. This lady's throwing us curveballs.
Look how
Where's
big,
she at from the day?
look how big
That's
that
right.
finger is. Like that.
Oh, 84. Somebody's home, she's fine.
Okay, 25 minutes, guys, you gotta make it through all three.
All three?
All three, you gotta make it through all three. You can do this, first period did it, plus they get the extra credit, last one. You can do this.
Professional.
Did I mention,
Okay, and that bone was
Max humor is basically pelvis.
Yeah. So it's like from the late 70s.
It's my club.
Which is
My wardrobe. Or she got me to Hey, what do you guys have to measure on that?
50? No way.
Sorry. Why don't we just go through dental records and just look these up and call it good?
We don't have that.
Which is it depends on the size where feelings are, their teen shape for two.
Is there just like you said about
It
35?
goes in the dental records.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Is a Pop-Tart considered a
50?
calcium?
No, wait, wait.
Brace is considered two rings.
Oh, 56. 57. No, we're not. Yeah,
Okay, on that one, start measuring.
58. Are you serious?
So you just have to, if another group is there, you just have to start grabbing stuff and start measuring.
What's the law? What's the, yeah.
Reverse trigraph.
Make the humerus. 33.
That's how I can explain my kink is putting on the reverse trigraph. That's my favorite thing. I had to get my jaw wired shut several times because of that. And I'm like, rip my face.
No, I got it.
It's my gurgles of appreciation.
Okay, so if you're online listening, we did a bones activity class where you kind of get some help. Basically, we also, I handed out the skeleton, I got to report your time, 5 minutes, and you pay, 6 minutes a week, 7 minutes a week, and so on until, yeah. You retake it as you need to, but you need to do it, you're not gonna pay until you're done. And that's the end of day 3.
Yes.